Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mr. Bob again. Time for The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. As we continue on in this story that has been fascinating for me all my life. As I told you before, this particular series of books was very influential in how I came to love reading, and I hope it does for you too. This is one of those kind of books that I think either you like or you don't like, but for me, it was incredibly influential, and it gave me a love for reading that's lasted my entire life. So, I hope you enjoy it. Let Mrs. Husky know, or if you're reading from it with another class, your teacher know, and they'll get back to me. All right, here is chapter 3, A Short Rest, and we may be able to finish this chapter all in one go, so we'll give it a shot. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had gotten from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place, full of the noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they had seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and dreary it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of snow peaks gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen such a thing that had looked so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we have to get through, or over, or under those somehow, before we can come into the Wilderland beyond. It is a good deal of a way even from the other side of them to the lonely mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, and just at that moment he felt more tired than he ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing, not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for," he said. "We need food, for one thing, and rest in reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them and have to come back and start at the beginning again, if you ever get back at all." They asked where he was making for, and he answered, "You have come to the very edge of the wild, as some of you may know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives in the last homely house. I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting, but they had not got there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valleys and no hills to break the ground in front of them. Only one vast slope going slowly up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain. A wide land, the color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of grass green and moss growing where water might be. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for now they saw that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides, that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down surprised to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them great green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall. But a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than you would ever have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked by white stones, some of which were small, and others half covered with moss or heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf. who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones, and they followed his head, but they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. They came to the edge of a steep fall on the ground, so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered around him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below, and they could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped in the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of pine trees made him drowsy, so that even now and again he plodded and nearly fell off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then a burst of song like laughter in the trees. "Oh, what are you doing and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing. The river is flowing, oh, tra-la-lolly, here down in the valley. Oh, what are you seeking and where are you making? The faggots are reeking, the bannocks are raking. Oh, trilla-lolly, the valley is jolly, ha-ha. Oh, where are you going with beards all a-wagging? No knowing, no knowing what brings Mr. Baggins and Balin and Dwalin down into the valley in June. Ha-ha. Oh, will you be staying or will you be flying? Your ponies are straying. The daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune. Ha-ha." So, in case you didn't know, some of the terms here I've used or maybe slightly can seem a little bit different and maybe even slightly not good. And I just wanted to make sure you understand that this particular terminology that Mr. Tolkien is using is an older form of language, but it's important. Bannock is a kind of bread. It's made from Scotland. And so when it says the bannocks are baking, he's talking about the food that's being prepared. And the faggots are reeking was actually a term for wood for fire, in which they would stoke the ovens for the bakery. So if it sounded a little bit odd, that's what those particular terms mean. So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think. Not that they would care, not only would they laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them as the darkness deepened. He loved elves, but seldom he met them. He was a little frightened of them, too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think. Or get annoyed with them, for some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all at their beards. "Well, well," said a voice, "just look, Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear. Isn't it delicious? Most astonishingly wonderful." Then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one I have written down in full. At last a tall young fellow came out from the trees and bowed to Gandalf and to Thorin. "Welcome to the valley," he said. "Thank you," said Thorin a bit gruffly. But Gandalf was already off his horse and among the elves, talking merrily with them. "You are a little out of your way," said the elf. "That is, if you are making for the only path across the water and to the house beyond. We will set you right, but you had best get on foot until you are over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us, or will you go straight on? Supper is preparing over there. I can smell the wood fires for the cooking." Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay a while longer. Elvish singing is not a thing to miss in June under the stars. Not if you care for such things. Also, he would have liked to have a few private words with these people that seemed to know his name and all about him. Though he had never seen before, he, he thought their opinion of his adventure might be interesting. Elves know a lot and are wondrous folk for news, and know what is going on among the people of the land as quick as water flows, or even quicker. But the dwarves were all for supper as soon as possible, just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies till they were brought to a good path, and so at last to the very brink of the river. It was flowing fast and noisily, as mountain streams do of a summer evening, when the sun has been all day on the snow far above. There was only a narrow bridge of stone, without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could walk on, and over that they had to go, slow and carefully, one by one, each leading his pony by the bridle. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and they sang a merry song as the party went across. "Don't dip your beard in the foam, father," they cried to Thorin, who was bent almost to his hands and knees. "It is long enough without watering it." "Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes," they called. "He is too fat to get through the keyholes yet." "Hush, hush, good people, and good night," said Gandalf, who came last. "Valleys have ears, and some elves have over-merry tongues. Good night." So at last they all came to the last homely house, and found its doors flung wide. Now it is a strange thing, but things that are good to have, and days that are good to spend, are soon told about, and not much to listen to. And while things that are uncomfortable, palpitating, and even gruesome may make a good tale, and take a tale of telling anyway, they stayed long into that good house, 14 days at least, and they found it hard to leave. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble. Yet there is little to tell about their stay. The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose fathers came into the strange stories before the beginning of history. The wars of the evil goblins and the elves and the first men in the north. In those days of our tale, there were still people who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors. Elrond, the master of the house, was their chief. He was as noble and as fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, as wise as a wizard, as venerable as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part of the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect, whether you like food, or sleep, or work, or storytelling, or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Evil things did not come into that valley. I wish I had time to tell you of a few of the tales, or one or two of the songs that they have heard in that house. All of them, the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in a few days there. Their clothes were mended as well as their bruises, and their tempers and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions light to carry, but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. Their plans were improved with the best advice, so the time came to Midsummer Eve. That would have been late June 21st. And they were on to go again with the early sun on midsummer morning. Elrond knew all about runes of every kind. The day he looked at the swords that had been brought from the troll's lair, he said, "These are not troll make. They are old swords, very old swords of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the goblin wars. They must have come from a dragon's hoard or a goblin's plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many, many ages ago. This Thorin, the rune's name Orcrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamdring, Foehammer, that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well." "Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder?" said Thorin, looking at his sword with new interest. "That I could not say," said Elrond, "but one may guess that your trolls had plundered other plunderers, or come on the remnants of old robberies in some hold in the mountains of the north. I have heard that there were still forgotten treasures of old to be found in the deserted caverns of the mines of Moria, since the dwarf and goblin war." Thorin pondered these words. "I will keep this sword in honor. he said. May it soon cleave goblins once again. I wish that is likely to be granted soon enough in the mountains, said Elrond. But show me now your map. He took it and gazed long at it, and shook his head, for if he did not altogether approve of dwarves and their love of gold, he hated dragons and their cruel wickedness more. And he grieved to remember the ruin of the town of Dale and its merry bells, and the burned banks of the bright river running. The moon was shining in a broad silver crescent. He held up the map, and the white light shone through it. What is this? He said. There are moon letters here beside the plain ruins, which say 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast. What are moon letters? Asked the hobbit, full of excitement. He loved maps, and as I've told you before, and he also liked runes, and letters and cunning handwriting, though when he wrote it himself, it was a bit thin and spidery. Runes are kind of an ancient writing that is often carved into rocks or in metal to talk about the rock or stories of the particular item. Moon letters are rune letters, but you cannot see them, said Elrond. Not when you look straight at them. They can only be seen when the moon shines on them. And what is more, with the more cunning sort, it must be a moon of the same shape and season as the day when they were written. The dwarves invented them and wrote them with silver pens, as your friends could tell you. There must have been written on a midsummer's eve in a crescent moon a long while ago. What did they say? Asked Gandalf and Thorin together, a bit vexed perhaps that even Elrond should have found this out first. Though really there had not been a chance before, and there would not have been another until goodness knows when. Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, said Elrond, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole, read the runes. Durin, said Thorin. He was the father of the fathers of the eldest race of dwarves, the Longbeards, and my first ancestor. I am his heir. Then what is Durin's day? Asked Elrond. The first day of the dwarves' new year, said Thorin. It is all should know, the first day of the last moon of autumn, on the threshold of winter. We call it Durin's Day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together. But this will not help us much, I fear, for it passes our skill in these days to guess when such a time will come again. That remains to be seen, said Gandalf. Is there any more writing? None to be seen by this moon, said Elrond, and he gave the map back to Thorin. And then they went down to the water to see the elves dance and sing upon the midsummer's eve. The next morning was a midsummer's morning, as fair and fresh as could be dreamed. Blue sky and never a cloud, and the sun danced on the water. Now they rode away amid songs of farewell and good speed, and with their hearts ready for more adventure. And with the knowledge of the road they must follow over the misty mountains to the land beyond. And that's the end. As I said, we were able to finish the entire chapter in one go. That's the end of a short rest. Chapter 4 is next, Overhill and Underhill. I hope you continue to keep up with your schoolwork. I know this is a bit daunting, but you'll be able to make it, and we'll get along very well with all this. Things will turn out in the end. Hang in there. This is Mr. Bob. Goodbye.